Hey guys, it's Cole here, back with another redstone tutorial video, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make an infinitely expandable version of my tunnel bore. Now I got a lot of info to go over on this, so you're going to want to make sure you don't miss any of the parts that contain information that would be important for you to know, though you won't have to watch all of it depending on how big you want to build your tunnel bore. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to go over the design a little bit, and then from there I'll head into the tutorial. Now, if you saw my original tunnel bore video on this, titled Cheap Tunnel Bore V2, there has been some changes to the gravel attachment. So if you haven't seen the fix video on that, you're going to definitely want to make sure you check out that, as there have been a few slight changes to make sure that it doesn't potentially end up blowing up the nose of your machine. And from there I'm going to go into some tips on using this that I've learned from using it in my realm. And then lastly, we're going to go into the topic of actually making this thing infinitely expandable. Now if you only plan on making this up to 8 tunnel bores wide or less, then you'll be able to skip that part of the video if you want. However, if you want to make it more than 8 tunnel bores wide, you're going to want to watch that, as you do have to make a few slight changes to the design because of chunk borders. But other than that, you can skip that if you're not going to be building this insanely huge. Now if you saw the previous video, you'll recognize this up front here as my tunnel bore design. And then here at the rear we have this linking mechanism. Now this is a slightly modified version of a design from a YouTuber known as First Dan Josh, which I'll have a link to his channel in the description if you want to go check him out. I've just made a few small changes to it to make it work better with my design up front, such as I've flipped it upside down first of all, and then I've also made a slight change to the trigger mechanism itself, and also I've added an extra slime block in here to the linking arm to give the TNT one block more of space, since with my design here the TNT is all in one line versus his it was a little bit more staggered. But unfortunately we can't really do that with this design if you choose to add any of the attachments such as the Nether arm or the gravel attachment, because those could potentially get blown up if they're too close to the TNT, which could happen with that staggered design. Now for the build process here, I'm going to kind of be splitting the build up into these 3 pieces that you see here, with the green here being our linking mechanism, our yellow being either a pusher or a trigger mechanism, and then the red being the tunnel bore itself. I'm also first going to show you how to build just the one wide design, and then from there I'm going to show you how to build this part here, since this and farther to the left of me here will all be the same for each additional module that you want to add to it, with the exception of whether you want to add a trigger or a pusher. Now here you can see all the blocks you'll need to build the first single wide module. Now this of course does not include what you'll need to build additional modules. I'm going to go over that when I go to build that. Now, with both though, for the yellow concrete you can use any block you want, though I would highly recommend using cobblestone, as it's very blast resistant. And then for this slabs, you can of course use any block you want there, but I would again recommend using the cobblestone variant. Now you're of course going to need to hollow out a big room for this underground. Now as for the level your floor should be at, I would recommend either negative 58 or 57, but I'll get a little bit more into that later when I show you the one that I built on my realm. As for the dimensions of the room, it needs to be 25 blocks long and then 6 blocks tall. And then for just our first starter module here, it needs to be 3 blocks wide, but then for each additional module it's going to need to be another 9 blocks wide. Now you can ignore some of this coloring I've done here. I've just got the cyan here to show the 9 blocks wide segment over there, and then this dark blue is just to highlight where I'm going to be building, so that hopefully I can do this in a lower number of takes without screwing up. So now to start, we're going to start right on the back wall and place an observer just like that. going to be going into a slime block with a piston on top of it. From there we're going to have some space here, so we're going to go with 2 blocks of space, and then place a temporary block like that, redstone block on top of it, and then a sticky piston facing the rear like that. Now from here we place a slime block on top of that piston there, and then just our 2 choice blocks there. Now from here we can place a temporary block with a sticky piston facing that redstone block, slime block on top of that sticky piston. And from here we're going to place our trap chest on the back side of the sticky piston. The orientation of that won't matter at all. Now from here we're going to place a temporary block here with a upwards pointing observer. From here we're going to place our slab above the trap chest, and then you want to make sure that's on the top half. Also, if you want, you could swap out the trap chest for a target block, and then just throw something at it or hit it with an arrow. Now from here we'll add a forward facing piston, and so from here we're going to be building the tunnel bore itself. So we're going to start out with another temporary block here, upwards facing observer again. That's going to be going into a slime block with a piston on top of it. From here we're going to fill in 3 choice blocks. It's going to have a forward facing observer there, our dispenser facing up on top or in front of that, and then a forward facing piston. Now we're going to come back here and place a temporary block with a slime block in front of it, forward facing observer again, a piston right there facing forward, and then a choice block on top of it. Then we're going to place one more temporary block here with a slime block in front of it again. Here we're going to place another slab that's on the top half of the block. Now we're going to come back down here with a temporary block and then a block of choice in front of it. Then we're going to add 3 more choice blocks, and then lastly we'll take our ancient debris out and throw that on the nose. And with that, our first segment here is done. Now for each additional module, you're going to need all these resources that you see here at the top. And then you're also going to need to add either this row here or this row here, depending on what you want to do. So this row here is the additional resources you'll need if you want that to have a trigger module. However, if you don't want a trigger and you just want a push segment, you're only going to need these additional blocks and not these. Now this first part is going to be the exact same for each additional module that you want to add. So you'll just have to repeat this every time. Then we won't see any change until we get to these 6 blocks here. Now to start, you can go on either side. I'm going to build it on this side though. We're going to add a piston here, block of choice next to the sticky piston there. From here we're going to add 8 slime blocks. Now from here we're just going to copy all of that to right here, but mirrored. Now from here is where things will start to change. So if you want, you can add another trigger module, just like over there. However, I'm going to be building a pusher module, so we're going to add just 1 choice block, a observer, and then lastly a piston. And then from there, you would just copy and paste another tunnel bore in front of this, with of course a block of space, just like you see there. So the next thing we're going to build is going to be the Nether arm attachment, which if you haven't seen that before, that will allow us to get double the efficiency out of our TNT in the Nether. For that, you're going to need these resources right here. Now these of course can still be any choice block, and this slab could also be a full solid block if you want. I just choose to have a slab in there as it looks a lot better, which you'll see when I build it. Now to save ourselves some digging when we go to build this, I would recommend building it on the inside. And to start out, we're going to find this observer right here. We're going to place another one right next to it, going down. That's going to be going into a slime block, which is going to have a forward-facing piston underneath it. We're going to place a temporary block right here with another forward-facing piston right there. here we'll take 2 slime blocks in front of it like that. One more observer that's going into it to power it. From here we'll take 2 choice blocks and place them right here. I would highly recommend using cobblestone right there, as those are probably the most likely to get blown up. Now from here, we're going to place a slab on the bottom of that slime block right next to our dispenser right there. And then lastly, we're going to place a hopper going into the piston. And now in the overworld, you would just load your TNT in the dispenser there. However, if you have this attachment added to it in the Nether, you're going to instead insert your TNT into the hopper. So now from here, with the gravel clearing attachment, the resources that are required is going to depend on whether or not you have the Nether attachment on. So if you do have the Nether arm on, you're only going to need these items here. However, if you don't have the Nether arm on, or you're building this in the overworld, you're also going to need these additional materials here if you want to add the gravel clearing attachment. So first I'll build it on this one here with the Nether arm attached. We're going to start out by placing a piston in front of this observer. Then from here we're going to place a slab on top of that slab with a slime block next to it, and then another slab here so that there's 1 block of space in between this slab and the piston we placed. Now from here we're going to add 4 more slabs right here, and you want to make sure that all these slabs are on the bottom half of the block. That way when gravel falls on them, it'll break. Now from here we're going to place a slime block here, 2 ancient debris there, a lantern here, and then 1 more slab right there. And from there we're going to come over here. We're going to place 2 more slabs right here, and these are just to align the TNT so that when it spawns directly in the center of the block. That way if you have gravel that ends up landing and it stacks up higher than the nose of the machine here, the TNT doesn't end up colliding with it and blowing up the nose of your tunnel bore. Now if you're building it without the Nether arm attached, I'm going to build this inverted here because, you know, technically if I had dug a hole and built this underground, there would be a wall right here. So I'm going to build this to the inside like this because we are going to be adding a slime block, which if we built it on this side would stick to the wall, and you don't want that. So if you are building this, you know, on the end machine, or the end of the machine I should say, you're going to want to make sure you don't build this right against the wall. So we're going to add firstly a slime block right here, and then a block of choice with a piston right there, and then from here we're pretty much just going to mirror everything for the most part. Our slab and slime block, and another slab there just like before, another 4 slabs, and now from there that nose part would be the same, so I'm going to skip that for a second and go down here where things will have changed. So we of course have this on this side to align it, just like we do over here. But now to align the left side, since we don't have the arm attached, and of course we don't want to build all that because that would be expensive to just align the TNT, what we're going to do is we're going to add a row of 5 slabs right there. Or if you wanted, these could all be full blocks. And then from there we just come up to the front and finish the nose. And that's what it should look like. Now that we got both of these built, I can show you both of them in action. And so to launch this, we're just going to open the trap chest and then let it close. You'll see the Nether side here has fired on the first shot. Now you'll see on the second shot here, all it's going to do is move forward while our overworld version here is still going to fire. And now you'll see on our third shot, the Nether arm will fire again. And as you can see, even with the every other shot function, it is still very overkill versus the overworld version. Alright, so now we're on my realm here where you can see I've got an 8 wide version built here. And now having used this a bit, you can see here we've got all this bedrock sticking up here because of the height we built it at. So this one, the floor was at -58. Now I would recommend maybe trying -57, though if you do that, you do run the risk potentially of running into lava lakes, and those would become a bit of a annoyance versus, you know, just having a choppy floor. I wouldn't recommend building it much lower than this though, because otherwise you're going to end up with a very rough floor that would be a pain in the butt to travel across. Now you'll see we have this line of blocks here in the middle of each of the tunnel bores. Now sometimes these blocks will end up leaving these line of blocks will end up leaving a second block up here at this height. And you gotta watch out for these because, as you can see, these will come into contact with these slime blocks here and get dragged along. Now, if you only have one attached, it'll be alright. But the moment it gets a second one attached like that, it will stop this segment of the machine. And so what will end up happening then is, as the the signal comes down the line, it'll stop at this one and not go any farther. It is pretty easy to fix that though. All you would have to do is just go to the next segment, break the redstone block, which at that point would cause it to fly one block forward, and then just replace it right back where it was on the back side of the sticky piston. Now you may have also noticed I've got a lot of glowstone on this to help keep things bright in here. So all these places where you see that I've got glowstone on it, you are able to do that just the same on yours, which is really nice for keeping mobs from spawning. And the last thing is, you may have noticed I don't have the gravel attachment on. Now that is because after having used it for a while, it became more of a nuisance than a help. I don't think it's actually ended up saving us from gravel landing on the nose once in the overworld. And the Nether would probably be more useful, but in the overworld it's got one slight issue. That issue is when the TNT unfortunately doesn't break this block right here on this layer, and then as the machine flies forward, that block eventually ends up right here in front of the slab, which then causes the gravel attachment to not be able to move forward because it is already at the 12 block push limit. So then when you try and fire it again, your TNT gets launched and catches on the back of this ancient debris and blows up the nose of your machine. And the Nether, that isn't nearly as much of an issue. As you can see, the Nether, it clears all that out very easily. Except in the Nether though, you do have your worst enemy being Blackstone, because Blackstone is it's similar to the Deep Slate in terms of blast resistance, and so you would have to watch out for that there. It's a lot easier to notice than in the overworld, because one block like that, it blends right in, and just being only one block sticking out from the ceiling, it's very easy to miss. So we ended up just removing those on the overworld version. In Another, you should be safe though, but you do still have to watch out for Blackstone, as that could potentially cause issues with that. It will for sure give you issues regarding the link here. You'll want to make sure you mine out any Blackstone so that it is at the layer of the floor here and doesn't come into contact with these slime blocks. And then one thing you can do for Blackstone whenever you run into that in the Nether is you can take out an extra piece of TNT here, or 2 or 3 depending on how much Blackstone you're running into, and you just throw it into the dispenser. So I'm going to do that quick to show you what happens. So I'll grab 2 here. Now you might be able to figure out what's going to happen obviously on your own, but what this is going to do now is, instead of firing every other time it will then work just like this and fire every time until, of course, the dispenser is empty, at which point it will then resume its every other function. Just like that. Alright, so now we can discuss the topic of making this truly infinitely expandable. So like you just saw, I had an 8 wide version on my realm, which is the biggest that you can for sure make it. Now, without making any changes, you can actually make it up to 40 tunnel bores wide, like you see right here. Of course, this is only the linking segment. But to build one this wide requires you to build both ends directly on a chunk border, and then also you can unfortunately only power it from this middle, or well, one of the two middle sections. Now you'll see here that the signal essentially has stopped traveling down the line, but then of course as I get closer, because of the 4 chunk simulation distance, every time that I get one chunk closer to the end, another chunk loads and it continues. And so you would have to, you know, without making any changes, only trigger it from the middle every time, and then walk down one side and then walk down the other and then back to the center, which of course is not ideal and would be very time consuming. Luckily we can make a few changes to the machine in order to make that work. And now I want to show you the chunk borders here. So you can see this is right on the chunk border here. And now the reason this can't go any farther because of the chunk border is what happens is if I was to continue this on like this, you know, so that would be going on and on. I'm going to go trigger this and you'll see that that segment is going to not work. And I missed, of course. You see, we're going fine all the way down. And I flew too fast, I guess. That shouldn't have worked. I guess it was loaded. I flew too fast. We're gonna try that again. Oh, I broke that half. Yeah, we don't need it anyways. So now you'll see, we'll go a little slower this time. And now you can see that segment right there did not continue on. So now the reason for this is because of the way that the chunk loading works and your simulation distance. So I am on simulation distance 4, which is the standard. If you haven't changed it, that's what your simulation distance is at, or if you're on a realm, it's at 4. And so basically what's happening here is this chunk that right here is loaded in, and then so this piston, you know, does its whole retraction thing and activates this observer, which would normally power all 3 pistons, but because this third piston here is in this chunk which is not loaded, it doesn't receive power. And then once this chunk does finally load, because the observer has already sent power, it's too late, and so this doesn't activate and push this all forward. So now to get around this, what we have to do is in situations where we have a redstone block on a chunk border, we just have to first we're going to swap out where the piston is and where the block of choice is. We're just going to flip them around, and then we're just going to add a redstone block right there like that. So it should look like that when it is in the finished state. Now you don't have to do this to every single module and on both sides. You only have to do this where these redstone blocks end up right on the chunk border, and you just have to do it only on the opposite side. You don't have to do it on both, because you see going in the opposite direction here, what would happen is because this chunk here would get loaded all at once, sticky piston won't have retracted yet, so when it gets loaded, essentially, you know, it doesn't break like you saw here. But now to find all the spots where you have chunk borders like this, you can either, you know, use the Foxy No-Tails pack, or you would have to brute force it. And the way you're going to do that is basically you're going to trigger this end, and when you do that, you want to be as you know, far away from the chest as possible to this side of it, so that you you know, you have the least amount of chunks loaded possible. And so we would just trigger this side like this, and we would let our signal go down, and then from there we would run after it. And then, so every place that we find a segment like this, we just make the necessary change, and then we continue on down the line. And then once you get to the end, you would just do it once more in the opposite direction, and then from there you're good to go. Well, hopefully that wasn't too confusing for you there and I explained that well enough. If it was though, of course, just leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Other than that, that's all I got for you today. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider hitting that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, consider hitting that subscribe button as well, and I'll see you next time.